The video you're about to watch is a hate incident. I'm not saying it might be or it could be. It is already a hate incident. It was reported to the police by an activist. The police watched it, assessed it. Some people have got the idea the police have to record things as hate incidents. That's not true. They exercise judgment as to whether it really should be recorded as a hate incident or not. In this case, they decided it would be recorded as a hate incident. And the police described me as the perpetrator of this hate incident, and they sent the document summarising this hate incident to my employer at the time, Merkston Castle School, which obviously blackened my name significantly with the school. And all of this happened in secret. Without me knowing about it, I had no right of reply. I couldn't defend myself. And the police didn't even tell me that this document existed, and yet it had been sent to my employer. So maybe this has happened to you too. As you watch this hate incident video, you'll see that what I say in it is really nothing more than the teaching of, for example, the Catholic Church. But according to Police Scotland, what you're about to watch is an example of a hate incident. Ruth Davidson, leader of the Scottish Conservative Party, has announced that she's pregnant. Here's the Daily Record's report. She's expecting a baby with her partner. All the reports of this, the two of them are having a baby together. They try to obscure the fact that in one sense they're going to have a baby together and in another sense they're not. They haven't produced this baby together. This baby is the product of Ruth Davidson and a gentleman whose identity is a mystery to us. But never mind all that. There's great rejoicing all round. Theresa May offering congratulations. Nicola Sturgeon chipping in as well, saying she's going to give a baby box to Ruth Davidson. Now, a baby box includes condoms. Anyway, if Nicola Sturgeon wants to give Ruth Davidson a box containing some condoms, then that's entirely up to her. Now, the important issue here, of course, is that this is the deliberate production of a fatherless child. Now, fatherlessness can occur for various reasons, each of them unfortunate, sad events. And in that case, we want to help the children involved with that difficult circumstance. But this is different. This is the deliberate planning of a fatherless child. Now, Ruth Davidson said that she hopes that her pregnancy will help normalise the production of fatherless children. She made a public statement to that effect. Now, in Scotland, there's been virtually zero dissent about that, as far as I'm aware. But mother and father are not parent A and parent B. They're not indistinguishable. They're not interchangeable. Now, of course, it's trendy to say that gender is a social construct, therefore sex is really of no importance, but it's just not true. Sex is a fundamental aspect of our identity. And children have got a right to a mum and a dad, a male role model and a female role model within the home. Now, in the Scottish Parliament, they never stop talking about children's rights. But on this matter, they're not so interested. What really counts is the adults' rights. It's what the adults want that matter. And adults' preferences take priority over children's well-being. So how does it work out, same-sex parenting? There's lots of research on the matter. And there's cause to be concerned. I'm just going to go through a few things now from the American sociologist Mark Regnerus and his research. So looking here at data from the New Family Structures study, and the research was done by asking questions to people between the ages of 18 and 39, and they were assessed on various aspects, and then this was compared with their report of their upbringing. We have adopted, people who were brought up in a divorced family, but they still lived some of the time with mother and father, brought up with mother, and mother had a lesbian relationship at some point, mother and father married throughout 0 to 18, with father who had a homosexual relationship at some point, living with a single parent, and then step family. So that's the basic things that were compared. Let's see how we do with some of the questions asked. Have thought recently about suicide. 5% for those brought up by a married man and woman, 24% for those brought up by a father who had a gay relationship, 12% for the equivalent lesbian section. Depression. Okay, you see the highest two there, beating divorce, single parents, step families, with the mother in lesbian relationship, father in gay relationship. by a statistically significant margin. Right, let's see what we've got next. Were you ever touched sexually by a parent or other adult? Married father and mother, 2% of people in that situation said yes. 23% when mother was in a lesbian relationship. Again, 6% a gay relationship. Not quite sure how to explain that, but the facts are the facts. Next one. Were you ever forced to have sex against your will? 31% for mother had a lesbian relationship, 25% father had a gay relationship, 8% intact married biological family. Ever had a sexually transmitted infection? Intact family 8%, 20%, more than double where mother had a lesbian relationship, 25% where lived with a father who had a gay relationship. The last one, let's have a look at sexual orientation. Identify as entirely heterosexual. 90% from the intact biological family, down to 61% for mother having a lesbian relationship. You could say genetics are a factor in that, possibly, but even if you look at the other family structures, you can see it makes a significant difference, where you assume genetics are not a factor. So very interesting. Now, needless to say, Mark Regnerus, the researcher, has been absolutely vilified. His research has been challenged on all sorts of grounds. With social science, any piece of research can be challenged on one ground or another. But double standards are evident. When something doesn't fit the narrative, it's attacked with particular viciousness. I've actually been reading a book recently that's very interesting. It's called The Sacred Project of American Sociology. It's published by Oxford University Press, Christian Smith. He writes about the way that the sociology departments in American universities are really political campaigning mechanisms. They see that as their function to make the world a better place by promoting a left-wing, liberal, progressive ideology. And that's obviously what they do. So the statistics always show worse outcomes for children from lesbian and gay parented households. But then the statistical jiggery-pokery kicks in, and by controlling for one thing or another, eventually you can make those effects disappear and claim that the children turn out just as well. But there's good reason to think that there are problems associated with, correlating with, same-sex parenthood. Now, one of the things that was on his list there was that more children are likely to report that they're lesbian or gay if they're brought up by lesbian and gay parents. Now, someone said to me just yesterday, they said, what's so bad about that? Well, there are various things. People who are lesbian and gay tend to have physical and mental health problems more than the general population, and also the relational instability is much higher. And also, looking at these statistics, it's also likely to increase the number of gay parents. And if these problems persist, then that could be a cycle that isn't entirely healthy. Now, blood relationships are also important. Sometimes it's difficult to explain why, but we just know that they are. People want to know who they're descended from. And does anyone really think it's the ideal to find out when they're 18 or to know that you're descended from a donor? It really isn't. The Scottish Parliament's obsessed with listening to children. But when children say, when they're older, as many of them do, they really wish they'd had a mum and a dad, what's the answer? Right, moving on to marriage now. Now, marriage is a public and legal commitment to remain faithful to and to love a partner. And it's the best for adults, it's the best for kids, it's the best for society. If you marry before having kids, statistically, that's got huge benefits in all sorts of ways. Now, Ruth Davidson and her partner announced that they were going to marry a couple of years ago, but it never quite happened. So we've had the explanation that they didn't get married because their dog needed a lot spending on vet's bills. Now, I don't want to be too cynical, but if I were in the public eye like that and I wanted to provide an excuse that showed that I was still a nice person, even though I hadn't actually got around to marrying the person I said I was going to marry, that would fit the bill. I mean, Ruth Davidson's not short of a bob or two. Does anyone really think that they couldn't afford to get married if they'd have wanted to? If that is the reason, if finance is really the reason, then I think it shows that Ruth Davidson seems more concerned about the wedding, the celebration, the occasion, the splashing the cash on that, rather than the marriage, which is actually the important bit, which costs very little. Now, to be a conservative involves trying to preserve the best of the traditions of your society and culture. Now, the social institution of marriage is a foundation of healthy society, and it's got massive implications. People say to us as the Scottish Family Party, oh, what have you got to say about health and education and welfare, etc.? But just think of the impact it would have if family stability was enhanced through the promotion of marriage. People's general health would improve. The NHS would be under less strain. Education, there would be less children with emotional difficulties, for example, to have to deal with and support, freeing resources for other purposes. Welfare spending would tumble. The need for housing would reduce drastically. At the moment, as families break up, you need more and more units of housing. That could be reduced. We hear there's a problem with the population. We can't sustain the population. We need mass immigration. But people will reproduce more in stable relationships. If you encourage that, the birth rate would increase. The government claims to be very, very concerned about reducing child abuse. Okay, very valid concern. But the statistics show that children are far and away safest in a family with a married father and mother, their biological father and mother. So that's what a conservative would be arguing for. But Ruth Davidson obviously is not a conservative. The only interest I've ever seen her showing in marriage was in same-sex marriage. And I've yet to meet someone who supports same-sex marriage that actually understands the purpose and benefits of marriage as a social institution. Well, moving on to childcare, Ruth Davidson's spoken a little bit about her plans. She said basically, don't worry, she's going to take the absolute minimum of time off with the young baby, and she's going to try and work just as much as before, be just as committed, and her partner will be working as well. So we'll assume this newborn is going to spend quite a lot of time in childcare before too long. So this child's going to have two mums, but it's going to spend a lot of time with neither of them. Now, for Ruth Davidson and her partner, that's their choice. My problem with this is that Ruth Davidson, as a politician, assumes that that's everyone else's choice as well. The same as every other MSP. She's got the ABM approach to childcare, anyone but mum. Kids are assumed to be an impediment to career, an inconvenience, and the state needs to help families to solve this problem. Now, girls get the message, women get the message as they're growing up. To fulfill your potential, you have to be a fighter pilot or an engineer or a director, whatever. And if that's what you want to do, the government's right behind you. If you want to be a full-time mum for a while, you're on your own. So a message to MSPs, some mothers don't want rescuing from having to spend time with their own kids. So when you tax families where one parent is a full-time parent, then use that money to subsidise families where both parents work, families have probably got more money as well, then you're acting unfairly and you're trying to pressurise families into living the way that you would prefer that they did. That's not what you should be doing. Anyway, moving on, Ruth Davidson. She's had a column in the Scotsman newspaper for a while now. What sort of things does she write about? Well, she's a fully paid up feminist, that's for sure. I think the last one was explaining how if LGBT people felt free in the workplace, that would boost the economy. I mean, completely ridiculous. She's the social justice warrior through and through, not a conservative bone in her body. What about the wider party? You might think, oh, Ruth Davidson's terrible, but there are some conservative MSPs who are better. What about Murdo Fraser? Well, he was congratulating Ruth Davidson on her pregnancy. He won't have anything to say about it. Now, there might be some MSPs who actually in the heart of hearts are looking on thinking, this is not right, deliberately producing fatherless children. But they keep their heads down, they don't say anything. What's the point of them if they never speak? There's no point. You're not going to have social conservatism promoted in the Scottish Parliament by voting Conservative. Now, what some people say to me is they say, I have to vote Conservative. We have to stop the SNP to save the Union. Well, you're going to save the Union but have a broken society? Would that be a great result? Now, as the Scottish Family Party, we oppose another independence referendum, and another EU referendum for that matter, in the next Parliament. We would vote against it if that was proposed. We're actually neutral on Scottish independence and the EU, but we feel that the recent referendums have settled the matter for the current Parliament and for the next Parliament as well. There are more important issues that need to be addressed. Now, I've got very strong personal views on the Union and on the EU as well. But where are we going to be in 15 years' time? Are we still going to be having a Brexit Referendum 3, Indy Ref 5, while society unravels under our noses? Even if you think that Scottish independence and the EU possibly are vitally important issues. Remember, in Scottish elections, you've got 2 votes. So you can use your first vote if you're a nationalist to vote SNP. Say, if you're a unionist, you could vote Conservative or Labour. But then you've also got your second vote, the regional list vote. If you want to promote marriage and family in Scotland, you should give your second vote to the Scottish Family Party on Thursday the 6th of May, 2021. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Do subscribe to us on YouTube. Have a look at our website. We are a political party, and you could even join us. Thanks for watching.